All right, hello. Welcome to my presentation. I feel a little bit like I'm back in school. But tonight I have a brief presentation on a little game we've made called EPIMETHEUS. It's a short point-and-click adventure game. It was made possible in part by funds from the Statewide Community Regrants program. Now, since the game itself is an interactive experience, I didn't want to just play the game and present it that way. It's intended for, someone to play it and feel it for themselves. And you can do so at the link in the description of this video. You can play it in your browser. You can download it for Windows. If you're on a Mac, you can play it. We've had a lot of people go, I'd love to play, but I'm on Mac. You can play it in the browser. But instead of just showing the game, I thought I'd do a brief little presentation on how it came together. In part. It's been a very long process, and I'm not going to go into excruciating detail, but I'm going to give a little, 8-minute or so talk on how it got from one idea to the next and from here to the screen. And after that, if there's any questions about the game or where things are headed or what we're doing, I'll answer those. But for now, let's take a look at this little presentation I've put together here. Game development is a field that I've played around in for a very long time now. Back around 2001, I started learning how to add my own textures to games like The Sims, and a few years later, I would begin a long series of incomplete projects made in RPG Maker. Soon after that, I started using Game Maker to create various prototypes for games, like the one you're seeing right now. And that's where I was happy to leave things until around 2022. Before that point in time, I really didn't have any serious ambitions when it came to game development. I enjoyed learning some of the basics and playing around with prototypes, but I didn't really have the time or means to take the hobby any further. But around 2022, I began to feel the urge to make a real game. I had a story that I wanted to tell, and I had some vague concepts for how the gameplay could feel. This is where the real roots of EPIMETHEUS were established. I figured that I would make a 3D point-and-click adventure game, inspired by titles like Harvester and Obsidian, or Myst. I took a class on Unity, which is a very commonly used game engine. What I learned from that class was that I am not at all cut out to be making 3D games in Unity. Throughout the rest of 2022 and 2023, I did a lot of thinking about how I could simplify the game ideas I had and turn the project into something more manageable for my skill set. In early 2024, I decided to adapt my ideas into a 2D pixel art game, which would alternate between a third-person view and a first-person view. To do this, I went back to using Game Maker, which is the game development software that I have the most experience in. I played around with this for a few months, but after a while, I became uncertain about using Game Maker. In a decision that feels totally insane now, I shifted development to a different engine called GB Studio. This software is used to make games that can play on the original Game Boy. That means that there are some serious limitations on memory, textures, sound, and everything else. I thought that making a game under such strict limitations would be some great challenge for me to take on, but after around 2 months of trying to make it work, I decided to keep the Game Boy style graphics, but ditch the strict limitations by using yet another piece of game development software. This time around, it was something called Visionaire Studio, which is used specifically to make point-and-click adventure games. I began taking photos and processing them to look similar to the graphics of a Game Boy game. This was around November of 2024. By December of that year, I had once again decided to drastically change my approach. This Visionaire Studio version of the game was going to be strictly first person, but I started to feel unsatisfied with some of the features of that engine, so once again I decided to go back to Game Maker, and to revisit that idea of switching between third and first person perspectives, while maintaining the look of the Game Boy as a reference point for the visuals. I worked on this for a while, but again, I wasn't really satisfied with how things were going. Here you can see various stages of this idea being worked out. It was around this time that I learned that if I used pre-rendered background images, I could make a 3D point-and-click adventure game in Game Maker. Now, this seems really obvious to me today, but I just hadn't considered it as a possibility until I started finding other adventure games made in Game Maker. So I downloaded Blender and I began trying to make some basic environments. This proved to be an extremely difficult task for me. I was making progress, but I realized pretty quickly that if I was having this much trouble just making a couple boxes for buildings, there would be no chance of me making any decent looking character models. So I began searching for an artist who I could hire to make me some characters. I made a few posts online about my search, and I got a lot of responses, but a lot of them seemed like scammers, and the ones who weren't scammers weren't really working in a style that I felt would fit the game that I wanted to make. I learned that there are a lot of people out there making character models for furry VTubers. Eventually, I worked up the courage to approach an artist who goes by the handle Fearmongrel. I had seen a bunch of their work on Twitter, and thankfully, they were totally into working together. We talked about inspirations, limitations, and money, and before long, I had this untextured model of a detective to play around with while building some scenes. I was feeling more and more confident in my ability to make a real game by this point, but I was also quickly realizing the limitations of my programming knowledge. Everything I had constructed so far was a mix of closely following tutorials and my own best guesses of how things should work, based on the last 10 or so years I had spent on and off playing around with Game Maker. It was around this time that I had been awarded the aforementioned grant, so I had a modest budget that I could put into the game. This money was split between paying the character artist and a potential programmer. Once again, I put a call out, but this time asking for a programmer experienced in Game Maker who could help me to create a save system for my game, something that I was having a lot of trouble trying to implement on my own. Things weren't looking too good for me at first, but I was eventually contacted by Gleb Seratelli, an award-winning programmer who happens to work primarily in Game Maker. I sent him a brief video of the work I had done so far, and instead of making a save system for my game, he offered to go ahead and rework everything from scratch. He saw what I wanted to accomplish, but also knew that I had pretty much no idea what I was doing in terms of, actual technical construction of a working game. Before this point, I was fine with letting my game be pretty rough around the edges, but I realized that with Gleb's help, I could make a much better game. He put together a framework that I could use to further develop the scenarios in the game, and that's what I've been working on for the past 6 months. And over that past 6 months, our 3-person team has done a ton of work to put together EPIMETHEUS. We've been refining the character models, dialogue system, menus, and making sure that everything just works. The game itself is a very humble offering, and its main purpose is to act as a sort of groundwork for a bigger, more ambitious game that we'll release in the future. That more ambitious game is currently in development, and I'm hoping to do a proper reveal of the project later this year. That's my presentation on the game as it stands right now. I'll say as you saw, this has been an idea I've had for a long time, and I'm very grateful for the grant because it forced me to look at things from a perspective of, well, you have some starter money, you gotta pick a lane, if that makes sense. Whereas before, every 6 months or so, I'd go, yeah, this isn't feeling right, let me try something else. And because there weren't really any stakes or any deeper investment beyond my own time, which I often, like to think I have an infinite amount of, I was fine just kind of jumping from idea to idea and seeing what stuck. And it's very amusing to me that after all this time, going back to Game Maker, it just feels right. But the grant was very helpful in just kind of giving me structure that I lacked before. And then also finding teammates to work with gave me a lot more structure. And I'm very excited to continue working on this project going forward. Now, the game that we have here, EPIMETHEUS, it is kind of just an opening, an introduction to ideas and concepts, both narratively and with gameplay, that I want to explore in a much larger game. And as you saw, at the end of the video there's like a little clip of where we're going with that. I see Jesse saying it looks a lot like Max Payne. Does look a lot like Max Payne, I can get that. The direct inspiration is Robert De Niro's character in a film called Insomnia. But I think if you put any old white guy in a trench coat in an alley, he's gonna kind of look like Max Payne. Also, we are kind of intentionally sticking to the graphical limitations of a game made maybe 20 years prior. In large part, one, aesthetically, I like that stuff, but also two, I don't want this to be a game that takes 40 years to finish. It's taken longer than I expected it to in some ways. Some things have moved much faster, but again, setting some strict limitations, it kind of helps to keep you from jumping around, which is what I spent so long doing. And now I feel, I've learned a lot through this process, and I just feel a lot more confident moving forward that we're going to continue making cool stuff, and it feels really good. And it would not have been possible if not for the grant. These grants are great. I'd rather my tax dollars go to this sort of thing than more bombs. So I don't really see any questions or anything, but feel free to ask something. Thank you. Cool to see the early versions. Yeah, it's been fun for me to look back at it and put this little thing together and just kind of look at how things have come. And then again, if you haven't played the game yet, you'll see a lot of what we showed in that presentation is more fully realized now. And hopefully will continue to be more and more fleshed out in the near future as we do our next project, which again, I'm hoping to give a proper announcement to by the end of the year. Right now, the biggest obstacle is, okay, make something bigger, you need more money. So that's my main function right now, is acquiring that money and making the art happen. So thanks to everyone for dropping in, and if you want to see future updates, be sure to hit up the Hidden Machine Discord. There's a link down below. Try to keep everybody as updated as possible. And yeah, there's a lot more in the works. It's something I don't like talking about too much because it's not fully tangible yet, but it's all coming together and it feels really good. So I wouldn't have discovered you if I didn't want to watch all these Remedy games. Yeah, I totally hear you. The Remedy entertainment stuff has brought a lot of people to the channel, and I'm hoping that this game is something that Remedy fans will enjoy. I'm definitely taking my love of the deep exploration of Remedy's lore and their connected universe, and trying to make something that that I would find exciting in that realm, if that makes sense. So yeah, I don't want to say too much more, but very soon we'll give a proper reveal. So there's a few hints as to what's to come there in EPIMETHEUS, but the next game will be a much more ambitious and grand project, and I'm excited to officially share that in the future. But for now, all right, thank you everyone. Thank you for the well-wishing, and I'll see you in the future.